Shalom Aleichem. I'm glad you're awake. Okay, so before we even start in Rabeinu Bachya, in these last chapters of his gate of serving God, we need to re-emphasize, because some people, maybe they missed the programs or something. These last few chapters are done in a format of a conversation between the mind and the soul. Now, what does that actually mean? We all talk to ourselves. We all answer ourselves. It's an internal conversation that goes on. Anytime you're trying to figure something out, this is going on inside of you. And in this case, the soul, what's mentioned as nephesh, the soul, is that part of us that mainly relates to our emotions, okay? And the mind, the sekel, the intellect, is that part of us that learns from the Torah, that gains knowledge from the Torah, all right? It's the same idea, and Gwen had written it down actually in her book, because somebody, I think, when we were first talking about it, even mentioned it. Just like there are 10 sefirot on how the universe operates, this is the image. The real image of God that we are created in is also these 10 sefirot, the 10 powers of your soul. And those powers are divided into the mochin, the brains, that's the intellect, that's the mind, and the 7 emotive powers of the soul, that's the emotions. That's the format that's being taken here. The Ramchal actually also copies this exact same format in a book that he writes called Da'at Tevunot, which is generally translated something like the knowing heart. But it's really knowledge of the heart. Because what is it that we're doing when we study the Torah, when we develop our intellect, when we develop our minds? We are acquiring da'at, knowing, knowledge. Anyway, that's the key to this format, to understand that it's an internal conversation between the mind, which is what's learned from the Torah, and the soul, which is wanting to know, wanting things to make sense, wanting things to, how do I proceed from here? What do I do? What's expected of me? Now, that's a soul that has a desire, okay, for something other than just its own self-gratification. But I have a feeling that even people who are involved only in self-gratification, they also have these same questions all the time. They just don't ever act on them. That's what I think. Someone who tells me, who's constantly in the pursuit just of some sort of pleasure, whether it's money or power or honor or whatever it is, we know that just that self-gratification is never satisfactory. It does not satisfy them. That's why there's such things as greed, where a person can amass more than they will ever use in 100 lifetimes, and it's still not enough. Because it hasn't, so their soul is still having these questions. They've just pushed it down so much, and they don't have an intellect, they don't have a mind, they don't know anything from the Torah. But the internal conversation is still going on. Okay. So we are on, the last time we were together, we looked at his preliminary dealing with the Jewish idea of predestination, and meaning, are we puppets? Is everything already written in a script and we're just following the script? Or what is also called divine justice. Or is a human being actually responsible for what they think, say, and do? And at the conclusion of the last time we were together, it was, we don't completely understand that. It's a paradox. It really is a paradox. But how is it that we should proceed? We should proceed as if everything depends upon us. Because this is what we've taught so many times, and from works like Derek Hashem, the Ramchal demonstrates very clearly there that Hashem has made the universe so that human beings are wild cards, in the sense of the things that they think, say, and do are having an effect. They affect things. So, Rabeinu Bachya says we should proceed in life as if everything depended upon us, what we think, say, and do, and at the same time have trust in Hashem that everything depends upon Him, because it does. So that's the idea. Now, on page 327, if we're using Feldheim's translation, on the English side of the page, he begins chapter 9, and he is not finished yet with this idea. He still wants to develop it a little more. And the soul is fixing to not just ask a question, but is going to give over, and it's Rabeinu Bachya's book, so we need to let him, so somebody says, well, that doesn't make sense, what the soul was giving a parable. I thought the soul was trying to learn. It's Rabeinu Bachya's book. If the soul wants to tell a parable, let the soul tell a parable. All right? So calm down. So the soul tells the mind, you've comforted me in having made me give up the hope of actually ever grasping that subject. In other words, you don't need to burn your brain power up and your soul power and your will power up trying to really understand that, because one minute you'll think you've got a handle on it and the next minute you don't. The basic thing is, again, I want to state it again because so that we don't make any mistakes. Proceed through your life as if everything was dependent upon what you thought, said, and did, because it is. And at the same time, trust in Hashem that everything is dependent upon Him, what He is doing, because it is. Okay? Two opposite sides. So he says, but reveal to me, what is the secret? There's going to be something very important said here. What is the secret of my existence in this world? What's its aim? What's its purpose? And give me, as well as you can, and in brief, some conception of the form. What is the form of compulsion? In other words, meaning Hashem is running everything, making everybody do everything. And divine justice, meaning that we have free will and that it's all on us. So that my condition not be like one who did not understand the way to his own good, as I heard happened to one of the kings in the following story. So let's hear the parable that the soul wants to tell here. It's very interesting. You'll pick up on it immediately. In one of the Indian islands, the inhabitants of a state agreed that each year they would appoint a stranger as their king, their ruler. And when his year was over, then they would banish him, and he would return to the status he had prior to his appointment, and they appoint somebody else. So once they appointed over them a fool who was unaware, totally unaware of their secret plan for him. He was in the dark. And he accumulated much money. He built palaces which he fortified. He built the country. He built the state, but he sent nothing out of the country. On the contrary, whatever he had abroad, his money, his wife, and children, he didn't leave them abroad. He actually brought them into the country. And when his year was over, the citizens sent him out. They stripped him of everything. He deprived him of all that he had built or acquired from the beginning of his term until its very end, so that when he left he had nothing at all that had been his inside the city and outside of it. He regretted and grieved for the trouble he had gone to and the effort he had expended in building and accumulated what was then passed on to another. Are we already catching the metaphor? This is a soul that's here, who's a king, but is asleep. He's unaware of the secret. He's unaware of the secret plan. Then the people decided to appoint as their ruler a stranger who was wise and discerning. And when appointed, he chose one man among them, and he showed him favor, and he asked him about the customs of the people and their laws, which had formed the basis of their relationship with his predecessors. This man revealed to him their scheme and what they intended to do to him. Now, you know what that's representing? That's a person who actually does an investigation, who isn't just bebopping along, totally ignorant and not wanting to know anything. This person wants to know something, so he makes an investigation. And what does he find out? He finds out about the secret scheme. He finds the secret. Once he knew this, then he devoted himself to none of the pursuits that had preoccupied his predecessor. Rather, he labored and he strove to take everything that was valuable in this state to another state. He outsourced everything. He was moving everything that he possibly could. All that was precious and dear to him, he put it in a different place. He placed no trust in the adulation and the honor that they showed him. He fluctuated between grief and joy the whole time that he was in the country. He grieved that he was soon to depart, and that the precious things he had managed to take out were actually few. For if he could have stayed longer, he would have been able to bring out much more. But he was glad that he would soon leave and settle in the place where he had secured his valuables, where he would be able to use them and enjoy their various benefits and pleasures with peace of mind, confident spirit, and without interruption. When his year had ended, he was not troubled at leaving, but he hastened to it with heartfelt joy and calm, applauding himself for his actions and his efforts, and he went on to abounding good, to great honor, and to continuing joy. So he had happiness in both situations, because he knew the secret. And he attained his wishes in both places. I am afraid that what happened to the fool, as the soul continues, who wearied himself and lost out in both places, will happen to me. Since God has endowed me with you, the intellect that can learn Torah, then teach me and reveal to me my condition, and share with me what you know of the secret of my existence and the ways in which I can better my lot. Do we catch both sides of the parable? It's two different people. One person who is asleep, the other person who is awake. One person leaves everything that he ever did to his children and relatives he doesn't even know. Okay, the other one who knew why he was there and knew it was going to come to an end, he did everything he can to put something to the place he was going. So the mind says, you have just given, in the parable that you related, a really exact picture of your state in this world, and have shown that your condition in it is like that of the kings that you mentioned. It's now clear to you that you are a stranger here in this world, and that you will soon depart. And by the way, there was a big difference in the departure too. The fool who had to depart and leave everything, he wasn't happy. The other guy, even though he wished he had longer, he was okay with taking off. It is now clear to you you're a stranger here, and you'll soon depart. So you should therefore act as the wise and discerning ruler did, so that your condition may be like his. Should you deviate from this course, then my words will be of no use to you. And all of my fine, beautiful language that I'm speaking to you brings you no advantage. And the soul says, if I had no desire in this matter, interesting that he uses that word, because we were just talking about that before we started this class. If I had no desire in this matter, then I would not have troubled to investigate what is hidden from me of the very nature of my being. Now the mind is about to begin to give answers, and not these answers are coming from Torah. The secret of your being is that the Creator created you, and the translation says, out of nothing. I have to stop. I'm sorry. From time to time, I read the Hebrew side of the page, and almost every time that I read the Hebrew side of the page, I say, why did they say it that way? Amar Hasekel, the intellect says, aval, but, sod devarech, the secret of your creation, of the very fact that you exist, is that the Creator created you, and I'm reading very, very literally, milo davar, not out of nothing, but from a state of lo davar, of no thingness. It's a big difference. In English, when we say nothing, we mean nothing. I mean, there's nothing there, okay? That's not what milo davar means in Hebrew, which is really a translation from the Arabic. I would really like to see it in the Arabic, but I'm pretty sure the Hebrew is closer. than to the original Arabic and the English translation, because in an English head, nothing doesn't mean no thing. Okay, a state of no thingness doesn't mean it's not there. It means it's just not in a state of being in existence. I know this is a hard concept.
Well, does it relate to the Ein Sof?
Because, yes, exactly. Because the Ein Sof is in a state of no thingness. There's no words or concepts that we have that we can apply to that, to the Ein Sof. He is a no thing.
But that's what we were created
from. Out of.
Okay.
Look,
okay.
Existence comes from, it's really, in Hebrew, the idea comes down to one letter, the letter tzadi. Okay, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the material where I could really share all of this with you and all of the examples, but I'm just calling it from my memory. The letter tzadi. The letter tzadi has to do with something that goes out, is related to that concept. In Latin, it's the idea of ex. So we'll hear that God created ex nihilo. From nothing is the way that's translated too. He created out of nothing. But again, even that should be understood out of a state of no thingness. Because X comes into the English language in words like existence, but listen to some of the others. Exit, exhaust, any of these words, and all of them mean to go out. So for something to be in existence, it must go out from a state of no thingness, and that's Ein Sof. Are you with me? It's a very, very fine point, and we don't think of it. So everybody would say, God is in existence. Actually, no. God is, the state of no thingness is, God is being, just being. So if we look at what the Ramchal says about that, when he talks about Hashem, he says Hashem is the only. We can't even say He's an entity. We can't even use that kind of word. We can't even say He's in existence, because that also means to go out from something. So we have to say, the best thing we can say is that He is the place. This is the word we use. He is the place. He is the source of existence or life or being itself. I know these are extremely difficult concepts. They are for me. And the only reason I even mention them is because Hashem is not like us. Hashem is not a created being. He is the creator who brings out of Himself, by the way, all of creation. It exits. That's the whole idea of the Tzimtzum and the re-entering of the Kav into the vacated space. Where's all that light coming from? Where's all that creation coming from? Out from Him. That's why the great Kabbalist, the Baal HaSulam, says the only thing Hashem created that was new, that didn't already exist in potential within Him, was a vessel to put it in. And that vessel is the will to receive. Very interesting, very deep thoughts. Let's get more practical. Let's come back to more practical things and try to put it in. So what does that mean to me? So he says, the secret of your being is the Creator created you out of a state of no thingness, in common with all spiritual beings that He created. Every spiritual being fits that. Anything that's in existence fits that description. And He wanted to exalt you and to elevate you to the high degree of His treasured ones, the chosen and the pure, who are among those that are close to the light of His glory, to bestow favor and grace upon you. So basically that's Rabeinu Bachya's very flowery way of saying what the Ramchal would say. He wants to give you pleasure. And the greatest pleasure He can give you is Himself. But you will only be worthy of this only after three things, Rabeinu Bachya says. So what's the first thing? We may not get to the three things. If we don't, we'll pick it back up the next time we're together. The first is the removal, he says, of the veil of folly that hangs over you. Wake up. That's the first thing. That's basically what he's saying. Pull this, you walk around with this veil that you can't really see what reality actually is. And it's a veil of folly that hangs over you so that you may be enlightened by the knowledge of Him. Begin to study. This is the idea of waking up, beginning to learn Torah, beginning to develop knowledge. The second, though, so first we wake up, and then what happens? Oy vey. The second thing is that you be tried and tested. And sometimes I argue a little bit with Hashem. I think this is a totally unnecessary step. You're tried and tested to see whether you will choose to serve Him. What is your desire? And how are you going to exercise that free will? Will you serve Him or will you rebel against Him? And the third thing is that you be disciplined in this world by bearing patiently the burden of His service in order that He raise you to the degree of the higher beings, the patient ones, of whom it is said in Tehillim 103:20, bless Hashem, His angels, mighty ones who do His bidding. All this, he says, you could not attain if you remained in your former state. What former state? As a soul in a body that has total amnesia and is totally asleep and is totally buried under those 7 emotive powers of his soul that are trying to constantly give him gratification in every possible emotion, desire that he has. I want to back up just a little bit on the third thing, that you be disciplined in this world by bearing patiently the burden of His service. And I want to say once again, to a person who is awake, and everything is about, all these duties of the heart is about serving Hashem and what it takes to serve Him. But anyone who is awake, that's the first condition, and studying Torah, learning from Torah, and any one of us who are being tried and tested, and I promise you there's not one person either in the viewing audience or the listening audience or in this room, in this studio, no matter where they are in the world, that is not, if they're awake, that they're not being tried and tested and refined in certain ways. But the third thing, this idea of patiently bearing the burden of His service, what does that actually mean? If you're awake, if you're studying Torah, and if you're okay with being tried and tested and you've decided to choose to serve, to follow Him and to serve Him instead of rebelling against Him, the burden of the service is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on the Shabbat, in a sense. The burden of His service doesn't necessarily have to do with how many hours a day you spend in prayer, or how many hours a day you spend doing the mitzvot, or any of those things. The burden of His service means constantly being connected and awake with Him and trying to serve Him in everything. And how do we do that? By always, again, it comes back to this, always having the intention to please Him. And that can become a burden only in the sense that we have to discipline ourselves to develop that kind of a thinking and that kind of a commitment. Okay, I'll get right off that soapbox and we'll move right on. We have a few minutes. In His wisdom, wait a minute. I'm trying to decide whether to tackle this because we're going to have to re-tackle it. I don't think, how much time, Jeff? 6 minutes. Let's see how far I can. I'll just read. It's very self-explanatory. Let's see if we can get this. In His wisdom, the Creator, may He be exalted, created for you this world and everything that's in it, inanimate objects, plants, animals, suitably arranged, properly governed, all of nature, in other words, all for your benefit. Out of the finest elements He chose for you a well-equipped palace, which resembles the world, and He's talking about your body now, which resembles the world in its roots, meaning the universe, in its roots, branches, and form. And in this palace He opened for you 5 gates out to the external world. And from among His trusted servants He appointed 5 keepers of those gates. The gates are the instruments of the senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the hands. And the gatekeepers are the five senses which employ them: the sense of sight, of hearing, of smell, of taste, and of touch, through which you can arrive at all that is useful to you in this world. Simple. True.
So this is what the gatekeeper is.
There are five gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5 gates. He also prepared for you in this palace. When he says palace, he means the body. 4 levels for 4 rulers to govern it. By the way, these are the 4 ancient things. Remember, Rabeinu Bachya is writing 1,000 years ago, and yet what he is about to talk about what's sometimes called the 4 humors, which is the basis of all kinds of ancient science on what the body is actually made up of, is this idea. So he's going to say he prepared for you in this palace 4 levels for 4 different rulers to govern that palace. Those rulers are the brain, and part of the whole point of studying Kabbalah is that needs to be the top ruler. Okay, the brain, the heart, the liver, and it's translated, and the testicles are the ovaries in the case of a woman. Furthermore, he placed in it 4 storerooms for 4 officers, namely the storeroom or the faculty of ingestion, the faculty of retention, the faculty of digestion, and the force of repulsion. Their storerooms and dwellings are, and here we come to the humors, the black bile, the green bile, the white fluid, and the blood for the better functioning of the palace. I wish we had time to study all this, because all of these things, especially within Kabbalistic writings, are very, very prominent, and they all stand for certain things. And we'll get to that maybe in the Food for the Soul series. He distributed servants inside and outside the palace to attend to it and to protect it. In 3 minutes we're going to get this. Those inside are the intestines, the veins, the sinews, the nerves, and the arteries. And those outside, the arms, the legs, the tongue, the genitals, the teeth, the nails, and the like. And he then prepared for you links and intermediaries between the spiritual and the physical. Which is what? Namely the blood, the natural heat, and the vital spirit. We should do a separate study on all of that, but not tonight. By his power and his wisdom, he then bound you, meaning your soul, securely to this palace, and he tied you to it in a well-ordered way so that you might achieve the 3 things which I mentioned to you previously. And he then provided you with 2 advisors, and he appointed over you 2 scribes, and he gave you servants and attendants according to your needs in this world. Of the 2 advisors, the first is the mind, the intellect, which instructs you in God's will. The second advisor is the baser instinct, the emotion powers of the soul, the animal soul, which actually misguides you and entices you to things through which you arouse the anger of Hashem, your Creator. Interesting. That's only if the second advisor is actually really the Yetzer Hara, which is tied to those emotions. Of the 2 scribes, and just tell Yonah that I need to finish this, and when I finish it, the program will be over. Of the 2 scribes, the first records your good deeds, whether done secretly or openly, internally or externally. Everybody already should be shivering. Through the offices of any of those already mentioned, the gatekeepers, the rulers, the officers, the servants, the advisors, the assistants, and attendants. And the second scribe records the bad deeds in the same way as we have stated in regard to the good deeds. Now, what are the assistants and the attendants? Look at it. They are the soul's moods and qualities, such as happiness and anxiety, joy and sorrow, remembering and forgetting, wisdom and ignorance, courage and timidity, generosity and tight-fistedness, being a compulsion, a stench, righteousness and wickedness, shame and brazenness, hope and fear, love and hate, delight and suffering, pride and humility, prominence and lowliness, and many other similar traits which are assistants and attendants, which you practice in your inner life. The Creator, this is the last paragraph and we'll be through until the next time. The Creator, may He be exalted, he commanded the gatekeepers and the rulers and the officers and the servants, advisors, assistants, and attendants to actually listen to you and to carry out your command until a certain time, except in extraordinary matters which he made clear to them when they were brought into association with you. These matters are the meaning of divine compulsion. In other words, Hashem, to understand them, all those matters is what is the meaning of the paradox of divine compulsion in the place of predetermination. It's very interesting. What's even more interesting is actually when we personify in a way all of these things, the way the mind has explained it, that's extremely interesting. There is even a sense that your soul and the body, all of these things that's being described here are not just natural results or natural consequences of your soul being put in a body. They're all like specific entities that Hashem attached to you in order to make the association between a soul, a totally spiritual soul, and a totally physical body. In other words, that there's a lot of things at work to put you in a body and keep you here and make you function. And we are totally unconscious of them all unless we study Torah. Okay, so that's as far as we'll get. Listen, he wants to talk immediately the next time we're together. The main subject is those two advisors, okay, and the final accounting. You might want to skip that lesson. And then finally in chapter 10, he talks about serving God with all of your qualities. Then we will be through with the third gate, and we will go on to the fourth gate, which is what I've wanted to do from the very beginning, which is the gate of trust in God, of bidachon, of trust, security. Okay. Finally finished. So I'll say shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.